So tell me, politics and religion. Why would someone say, in your mind, what do you think? Why would someone ever say that we shouldn't talk about politics and religion? Like, what do you think is behind that?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I think, look, there is an element of us that wants to be community and doesn't want to have division, right?
Yeah.
It's just kind of innate in our nature, right?
Yeah.
Most people kind of, you want the other person to like you in some kind of way. And that's, without getting in technical terms,
Sure.
that's a gift from God that
Yeah.
we want in general
Yeah.
to be community, right?
That's right.
And so I think some of it is a little bit of like, that these issues strike at the core of who we are. And if you talk about it at a cocktail party, it's a possibility you'll have either a debate or more, unfortunately, it can get negative. I think one of the reasons why that's a problem is, for some people, is because they're not able to separate the issues
Yeah.
from the person.
Yes.
Or to have real
Yes.
logical discussion. Like if you go look at the rules of logic, all the way back to Aristotle and
Sure.
Plato, like it kind of confines things and keeps it in a way in which you can, discuss issues without it reflecting you as a person,
Right.
me as a person.
Right.
I think we've lost that. We really,
Yes.
In a major way. So I think that is clearly part of that. I think the other thing is that we have, sort of tied into it, it has become an emotional reasoning in this world, right? And so religion in particular, especially, Catholic Church, I think for a lot of people, there's just sort of an emotional reaction to
Yeah.
it. And they feel uncomfortable there. And the same thing with politics. It's a sort of emotional reasoning. And so immediately, we sort of emotionally bond with the people we agree with, and we, emotionally push back on the people we don't agree with. And I really don't know where is, what's the end game here, so to speak. It seems like it gets worse and worse.
I think not talking about it is perpetuating the problem, right? Because I think since we're not talking about it, and we don't talk about it maybe at home, and then we're not setting an example of how to talk about it properly, and then our kids are being raised in an environment, or we were raised in an environment where that stuff wasn't even discussed among the family. So then therefore we have this hard time of being able to articulate it out anyway. And like you said, we have this more of emotional connection versus having an ability to actually articulate the reasons out. Like, and with our faith, as Scripture says, be always aware, ready to give an account, right? But do it in gentleness and love. And I think you're right on with that inability to separate the issue from the person. And so Fulton Sheen talked about this, about tolerance. He says tolerance applies to people, to persons, not to principles. So intolerance applies to principles and not to people. So tolerance applies to the person, but it does not apply to the principles. So you can have someone who lives their life with false principles as something that's inconsistent with the dignity of the human person. You can be upset with that, and you can take aim at that, but that does not mean I'm taking aim at the person. But we've wedded ourselves so much with our principles to ourselves that we can't help but like take offense to it. Yep. But tolerance does not then give me permission to then not say anything at all. Like Archbishop Chaput says, tolerance is not a Christian virtue. He said charity, justice, mercy, prudence, honesty, these are Christian virtues. But he said tolerating grave evil within the society itself is a very serious evil.
I totally agree. I think you mentioned G.K. Chesterton. I'm not a big scholar of him, but I know a few things that he's written. And I think he talks about at one point in one of his books about, also in conjunction with this, is the inversion of politics and religion. So to a certain extent, you and I, ideally, we have a decent faith, and
praise God.
we see the role of politics in its place. It's not the end-all, be-all. If someone wins the presidency or governorship that we don't agree with, we don't think it's the end of the world because we know it's not. That's not everything that's going on, right?
Exactly.
And in many ways, you know, you and I and others would say, you know, in some way God's will's here, and we'll see it at some point. And I think more and more loss of faith, or at least just left with a shell of faith at times. We have people that they just can't handle debate or change or loss in politics, and so it's placed too high when it really should be at a lower level in our lives.
You know, I remember when I was challenged back in college on my faith about why I believe certain things. I had a good friend of mine, and he was growing in his faith. I think it was Baptist, and he kind of questioned me. He's like, "Well, Jason, why do you believe in the Eucharist, or why do you?" He started asking me about particular Catholic things, and at that point, I realized I had no idea how to articulate my faith. And my best response was, because. That was it. Like, I didn't know anything. I couldn't go to scriptures and tell you where our Lord said this or said that. I couldn't tell you why we believe what we believe. And so it was kind of a frustrating point too, but I had to put on my big boy pants and kind of say, okay, well, hold on. I guess my friend in love, right, was trying to bring an awareness in me about my own faith that I don't know, and he's trying to awaken that, right? So, and I'm not going to take aim at, like, maybe he was doing it in a way that was rude or anything like that. I was like, okay, honestly, what was he trying to do?
Yeah.
So then it brought me to a point where I needed to make a decision. Was I just going to just say that's going to always be my stance, is that's just who I am, and that's just what I do? Or am I actually going to try to learn why I do what I do? And then that brought in a beautiful study and research and everything like that. And I'm still trying to understand more of my faith. But my point is that, how do we get into a conversation? How can we start those conversations where if we see that religion and politics should actually be spoken about? I think it's really important to the human person, to our society, that we do talk about it. What are some inappropriate ways of talking about it, and what would be some beginning steps for someone who might not do that but wants to, but doesn't know where to start?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Besides the church, I'm also spiritually sort of informed by my experience with Alcoholics Anonymous. And so there's a great saying in AA that I think applies. At least I've tried to live it a little bit. The idea of attraction rather than promotion. So there's certainly a role for us to promote the faith, like in conversation, right? But I think there's also something to be said about attracting people. So that is, in my opinion, is when you people are attracted to you. It's sort of these innate things, right? They just kind of sort of sense it in you. You've always been sort of decent and respectful, and you seem informed. People start to respect that and are attracted to that peace that you have, or sort of your thoughts about things. So I think that's part of the equation. Okay, that's not the whole thing.
No,
but
that's a good point.
Sort of, so
absolutely.
This sort of, and I think that actually fits in with politics too. But that's another. We'll get to that in another moment.
That's true.
But I do think there is a role in which, we are called to say things, right? And I think you need to recognize the difference from when you're going to engage in a full-on conversation and debate, and when you're just going to maybe plant a seed. Yeah. So, in many cases, unfortunately, and I could be misreading it at times, I'm not going to say, I find it's more about planting a seed right now, because the occasion for something else is just not there. Yeah. And I think that you could argue in some cases you could make some things worse. You could repel some people.
Yes, I agree with that.
If you're a little too self-willed about it, right?
St. Paul wrote, right, he says, who is Paul, who is Apollos? One waters, one plants, but God causes the growth. And so when it comes to, that's right, and that what you were mentioning, I think at the beginning, is that gentleness to being able to know the faith. You got to know your faith. You know why do you stand on what you stand on, whether it's politics, whatever it is, and to be able to then, with love, use that as an opportunity to then share the faith in that opportunity that's given to you. And it might be spoken in different ways for different people. But I think that sometimes the challenge is that we want to just kind of go guns blazing into an argument, where it's more like heart surgery, man. You've got that scalpel, and if you don't go hard enough, you're not going anywhere. But if you go too hard, you're severing some major organs other than the heart. So you've got to see it as this opportunity to like, and one note, and take the weight off your shoulders. You can't convert anybody. You're not going to change anybody's heart. You're there just to plant a seed and let God do the growth.
Amen.
We're seed planters, and we have to cast those seeds.
And I think Pope Francis has a great analogy that it really blew me away when I heard it, because it's amazing with our 2,000-year history.
Yeah.
You kind of think, wow, I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, right.
Not that I'm a scholar, but
right.
when he talked about the church kind of being a hospital,
yes.
almost. And so I think like I'm in my best discussion mode when I sort of am more like, how can I sort of plant that seed and kind of show them a way that can help bind wounds? Because all of us are wounded deep down, and some more than others, obviously. And so I think when you have that in mind, it's better. I mean, obviously, if you're on stage and there's a formal debate or discussion, or you meet to have a conversation, that's a different, where it's a different ball game. But,
sure.
I agree.
All right, Bishop Barron said, I think I'm quoting him right. He said, evangelization is really one beggar going to another beggar and pointing out where the food is. It's and saying beggar in accompaniment is like saying, like, in that sentence is also identifying the fact that, like, you are in need of this too. That you're not the master of the house. You're not the Lord. You are a beggar alongside another beggar, and we're trying to point out where the food is. And so I think taking that kind of humble approach, like you're saying, in love and gentleness, because I don't think pride can do well in evangelization or any debates. If you can win over in love and be able to speak that point clearly and not let yourself get caught up in those emotions, which the emotions can be great and they can help kind of inspire and motivate and all that, but can also cloud and disrupt and kind of cause you to go in different directions. So having that grounded in that truth and being able to kind of have those, those seeds ready to go,
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
So politics, religion, we've got to talk about it. We've got to find ways to be able to do it appropriately. What are some challenges you think that people have when it comes to people who have a strong faith entering into the political world? What are some, people's initial negative response to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I kind of see it as like there's two aspects of being a Catholic in politics. So, on the one hand, you have what the church teaches and how that can influence policy. And that's the thing that I think most people tend to gravitate to. Yeah. But I think actually, potentially the more powerful and important part is similar to what we were just talking about, which is how are you going to conduct yourself in politics, right? Yeah. I mean, because that's sort of half of the thing that will turn people off or will cause things to go awry and such like that. So, how are you going to campaign in a way that people will see, grace and faith in you and respect for others, So, it can be everything from just simply listening to what people think and then sharing your thoughts directly and not hiding things. Obviously, you're not going to lie about your position, that kind of stuff if you're a Catholic. I think also respectfully discussing things with another candidate in a debate. I think the greatest compliment that I had, and I don't say this out of bragging, it was just a real revelation to me, was I remember reading some Aquinas in graduate school, and the professor was talking about, he was a Cistercian, he was just like completely seeped in Aquinas and everything. He says, like the greatest thing you can say about Aquinas is that he takes the counter argument, like if you look at the Summa, and actually makes it the best argument that they couldn't even make it. Right. And so there was one time I was on a council meeting and somebody was saying something and I disagreed with it, but I kind of said, Rick kind of wants to do this, that, and the other. And I said, Rick, he's a friend. I shouldn't have said his name, but and I said, but no, I think this is why we need to go in this reaction. And he literally said something along the lines of, Mark described it better than I could. And I'm not saying that to brag, I genuinely not, but it was like, that is the sweet spot. Because I think when you are capable of framing someone else's argument in the best possible light and for their best possible motives, they will respect you for it. And then I think also there's something to be said about being able to then sort of, not defeat it, but then to show why something else is better. That's right. That's hard to do in this day and age. but it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still possible. You know, you can do that under circumstances. You can do that in committee hearings, you know, where you got a little more time talking about issues.
Right.
You can do that in one-on-one, and I think that's an important aspect of it. And then certainly how you treat issues. You know, immigration is a perfect example of that. I think on both sides we have this sort of incredible hyperbole about what's going on here, and we've lost completely, in my opinion, what this is really about. And I don't know how you get to a place where you're really having that discussion or debate and a
logical
decision making.
Yes.
But I think
Coherent.
people recognize that when you're taking the time to study issues, to acknowledge counter arguments, to recognize good intentions from another side or whatever the case may be, it goes a long way.
Yeah.
And then of course you got the Catholic social teaching and how our faith, I mean everything. Obviously like abortion is a perfect example of where innately that's wrong.
That's right.
And you're never going to see, I think, a devout Catholic agree to that.
That's right.
There's other things where you have a little more leeway, a little more prudential judgment on it. That I think, like living wages and things like that, where you can you can sort of
it's all coming back to the dignity of the human person. We're all trying to respect the dignity of the human person, and that comes in so many different ways in our lives. And so we've got to be able to take that Catholic teaching, right, of the respect for the human person and the love that we owe, and figure out how to way to navigate these different challenges that will come up throughout history.
Yep, exactly. No, it's the truth. I mean, I think also there's a richness in our philosophy and theology. I say philosophy because I think the church is probably the last place. Sometimes I feel like we're losing it, unfortunately, but I think we're sort of the last place where good, strong philosophical discussion.
I agree. We need more of that. We're losing it. That's part of the whole, like, don't talk about politics and religion. It's like that's not talked about, and we're not actually, I feel like we're losing the battle in even our schools of literally helping our children grow in their faith and understanding the philosophies and the theology, and to be able to kind of talk more about these particular things, to believe and to understand why we believe what we believe, but how to frame an argument, how to have a real debate where it's not just about like, I'm just going to talk bad about you and your personal life. Let's stay focused to the topic at hand. Let's look at the issue. And like you said with St. Thomas, he did that. He just didn't kind of bulldoze the truth over it. He sat back and sat with it and explained all the reasons. Really sat with it and say, okay, well, let's go ahead and let's look at it and say why we should do this or why we shouldn't do it or whatever. And then he would come back with the truth, and it made the truth so much more eloquent and understanding to the situation that he's trying to address.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I mean, when you have that kind of rich discussion, it's sort of fulfilling too, because you feel like you really have, gone on a journey with the other person or the people that you're with, and so you see less of sort of these steps or antics that I think divide, because we are a community at the end of the day, and that's ultimately what you want to try to recognize, I think.
That's right. So we're going to wrap things up, but tell me why you do what you do. Why are you doing the work that you're doing? What's at your heart?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was born and raised in Louisiana. I've always loved this place. When I was in high school, I went to Louisiana Boys State, and I was able to kind of see the richness of this place. There's no doubt the Catholic culture and community is a huge part of the state, from its inception. And so it's just a love, right? There's just sort of a familial love with this place. And it's just always killed me that we have never seemed to get out of our own way, never seemed to take advantage of the resources we have. And so I think what ultimately drives me is trying to be a part of sort of turning things around, or kind of setting us in a direction where we could truly flourish. I tend to gravitate towards economic and business issues.
Sure.
Just sort of mentally where I am. I love that. I love for a lot of reasons. And the thing about it is, it's not for the wealthy business owner. It's not for the GDP.
Right.
It's not for bragging rights. It's for that young couple who is like, I got to leave my family and go to Texas because there's no job here. It's for that young guy who, you know, the black young man who comes out with zero chance. You know, he's had a rough life. Maybe his dad wasn't around. I don't know. And just there's no jobs out there, and so he's got to turn to something else. You know, it's for that that retired couple. You know, and they got to go to freaking Colorado to see their kids for the holidays. Like they didn't want, you know, the kids didn't want to go. Like to me, that's the type of thing I feel like, you know, I think here in Louisiana we get a lot of things right when it comes spiritually. Yeah. You know, because we have that deep, rich, but it's how do we make this place a place where we can flourish? Yeah. That's what motivates me, you know, and then and certainly that's tied into my family and that kind of stuff. So.
And your faith, man. So you have it's a servant's heart, just like your dad was a deacon for the church, man. And deacon means servant, man. You've been a servant to your parish, to your family, to your state, and we're very grateful for all that you do, brother.